There is just one reality left. We are here and it is now. You get hold of that and hang on to it, or you might as well be dead.
Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch Live, where everyone is entitled to my opinion, and I'm Bill Stone. Tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, we have the usual plethora of content. I will talk about the weekly current Lancaster County, Nebraska, where I live, virus statistics. I will also be discussing Disney and their recent actions and the actions that I'm going to take in response to it. We'll talk about how Gina Carano has successfully uncancelled herself. We will do a review of Batwoman Season 2, Episode 4. And as a viewer request, I will have an explanation of the Linux operating system. Now, ordinarily, I would suggest that you call into the live stream, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't necessarily. There are instructions how to do so in my description box, also scrolling past in my lower third from time to time. But I have a fair amount of content tonight, and I'm not sure I'll be able to get to callers. You can certainly call in. I mean, you send me the email, as the instructions suggest. Whether I'll be able to get to it, I don't know. There's a fair amount going on tonight. But this is a live stream, so even if I'm not able to get to you via Skype, you can also feel free to talk to me about anything that you want to in my chat box. You can ask me any question, whether it's political, social, the virus whose name I can't mention without getting my channel and videos ranked even lower than they already are. You can talk to me about the United States Civil War II, or even things pertaining to science fiction, fantasy, horror, superheroes, and other related genres. I am happy to answer each and every question in as much detail and as truthfully as I can. There are some personal subjects that I won't discuss, but everything else, fair game. I will get to as many of my viewers as possible with the understanding that I don't really want the stream to run much longer than about 3 hours, and unfortunately I spent some time sitting in this damn chair already today, so my back is feeling bad, because I am a cisgendered white heterosexual male, and so old man, and so I have a little bit of lower back arthritis. So again, I'd ordinarily give you some instructions here about calling into the show, and they're in the description box and scrolling past in my lower third if you want to try, but again, I'm not entirely certain that I'll be able to get to you tonight. Hey, Drop of Truth. Hi, nice to see you today. As always, my audience is wonderful. Forced holidays this week due to the idiocy and the lockdown in Victoria. 21 cases of the flu in Melbourne so far, so they closed down the whole state. There's just crazy going on. I happened to be out getting groceries today and also stopped at a drugstore. And as usual, I'm wearing my big giant steampunk, gas mask thing, and get a lot of attention. This day I got a lot of attention. I got 2 whole selfies. The person who was giving me scripts had talked about it, and I was a pharmacist, and I was like, yeah, here's why. Every time they stop me, I talking about here's why. And they all kind of go, really? We only have 200 some deaths? That's kind of amazing. It's 215 this week. State of Victoria is about 94% the size of the whole United Kingdom. Yeah. It's ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. The best thing I can do is be passive-aggressive with that big-ass mask. So, while we wait for a few more viewers to trickle in, we will answer the question that nobody asked. What is the current Lancaster County, Nebraska virus statistics where I live? As always, I source this sucker. It's from the City of Lincoln / Lancaster County Health Department. There's a big, nasty long link below, but it's a cool little site. You could go there and take a look at things. I suggest in general that you switch the view to totals rather than weekly because it tells you more about the whole picture. Stats this week are, as usual, the Lancaster County population remains roughly constant at 323,862. The total number of tests that we've done so far is 168,613, which is up 2,015 from last week. However, this is not a representation of a percentage of our population or anything else, because if you have one test, it may well trigger a second one to make sure they don't have a false positive, or maybe they're not sure, they'll do another one, or you get one and it's positive, and it's just complex, so those tests don't mean a hell of a lot. The total number of Lancaster County positive tests, and this is an actual number that means something, is 27,713, which is up 391 from last week. This continues a trend of decreasing positive tests. Yes, we have an increase in tests, but the amount is decreasing every week from week to week. Total number of vaccine doses is approximately 61,600. I wish they'd give me that number exactly, but they don't on that site. That is up about 11,300 from last week. Now, given our other statistics and our rate of increase in general, the vaccine appears to have yet to have any slightest effect. It doesn't seem to be doing anything. It may have, in fact, made it worse, as we saw a 53 death spike the moment that it was first administered. The total number of Lancaster County deaths is now all the way up to 215, which is up 5 from last week. This is, again, representing a continual decrease. I mean, it's more people, but it's decreasing in the number. You had a big spike at 50-something, and it dropped way off to nothing. And, of course, this increase just tends to go down. Deaths as a percentage of total tests is 0.128%, which is up all of 0.002% from last week. And again, aside from the spike where we saw those 53 deaths when the vaccine began to be administered, statistically, we haven't had an identical number for weeks now with no real change. Deaths as a percentage of positive cases is at 0.776%, which is up 0.007% from last week. And again, aside from that spike that we saw when the vaccine began to be administered, this is all statistically identical for weeks now with no real change. And finally, the death as a percentage of population is 0.664%, which is up 0.0016% from last week. Statistically identical since the pandemic first started. There has been no real change on that, and it is statistically insignificant. More people die of misadventure, doing stupid things, getting into automobile accidents, heart attacks, things like that. There are more people that die every year than die from the 215 that we've seen so far with this virus. Drop it to Zing. I live in New South Wales. Population 8,164 million, 8.164 million people. We've had 56 deaths from this virus since last March. That's a lethality of 0. Good God, I'm going to need my glasses to read that. 0.0000068%. Why do we need a vaccine? Why do you even have to be worried? Geez, you got a higher percentage than we do by multiple. Well, I mean, I've got to go to 4 decimal places to get 3 decimal places accuracy. You've got, that's ridiculous. As always, I want to point out that you may not be getting accurate news about your virus statistics in your area. As I mentioned before, our local press is telling us reporting that all of our hospital beds are full and the hospitals are being stressed. But when you talk to people who are actually in the healthcare field, they will tell you that this is entirely bogus. In point of fact, they've told me repeated numbers of people, different people, that all of our virus ward wings are completely empty. There is no one there whatsoever. Always remember, when you look down in my lower third, nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. Never rely on the press for any kind of accurate information. Instead, rely on police and first responder frequencies. Broadcastify.com on the web. I have a link to that in my description box. And I use the Scanner Radio mobile app, which is linked to also in my description box. And also citizen journalists who are streaming from a breaking event, and preferably the ones who are just pointing their cameras and shutting up. This allows you to come to the conclusions based on what you're seeing, rather than having you have a talking head telling you what to think. Because nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. And I've done this before. My returning viewers will have heard this about 1 million times. But for 42 years now, 41. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up on my timeline. 41 years now, I've had a very masochistic hobby of debunking the press. It's gotten so good that in about half an hour with any given article, I can prove one of 3 things. Either the event being reported never happened, that it didn't happen as reported, or that when you strip away a slick interface, opinion, emotionally loaded language, and all kinds of other junk, you wind up with only a couple of paragraphs worth of actual facts. I have an open challenge to anyone who wants to watch the show. If you want to provide me with any print article, it has to be print so I can kind of put it up here and display it and show what I'm doing. I will sit here and debunk it cold. I will not read it in advance. I will put it up, make a card for it so I can show it, but I'll put it up and not have read it in advance. And I'll sit here and debunk it cold, and you can watch me how I do my methods. But again, anytime you want to do that, feel free. I can always throw that in as a content somewhere, someplace in a live stream. So, The subject of Disney has come up to me in the last couple of weeks, partly because of what they've done to Gina Carano, and partly because of a lot more important things. The important things were probably brought to my attention as a result of Gina Carano, but the important stuff caught my attention, and I'm going to make a very major policy shift on this show. Yeah, lethality, Dropper 2 says, is 7 out of 1 million people, if that's easier. It's utterly ridiculous. There's so many places in the world that have no problem with this. I remain convinced that its primary purpose was to break the economy so as to make President Trump look bad. I think that's all it was. If you had just left it alone, I don't think it would have been a problem. He probably would have been reelected. Anyway, Disney. Disney has become a very evil company. They have, if you watch the credits in Mulan, the most recent live-action Mulan movie, they give gushing thanks to a province in China that is now actively rounding up people of a religious minority and putting them into literal, not figurative, literal concentration camps. This is not like those detention centers at the southern border, which are not in great shape or anything. These are actual concentration camps, Hitler-style concentration camps from a country that is incredibly repressive, does horrible things to its citizens all the time and always has. And Disney has been snuggling up to them. Now, I get it. I understand Disney. There's a lot of bank to be made from those billion people over there in China. But I think you've got to ultimately have some kind of ethics. I think you ultimately have to say to yourself, well, yeah, somebody's going to make $1 billion on that, but tens of billions of dollars on the Chinese. But we own everything. How much money do you need to make? You own almost everything. You own news organizations. You own, the Star Wars property. You own the Marvel properties. You own everything. There's very little you don't own. Like DC and Star Trek are about it. And with Paramount being on its last legs, one wonders if that won't eventually become yours too. You own everything in the world. How much more do you have to own? You can stop here. You can say, okay, we're making a crap ton of money. We don't have to go over and kiss up to a regime that is murdering its own citizens and has done horrible things to them for my entire life and long before. And this really got pointed out to me because of what they did to Gina Carano, although that is so minor compared to everything else they're doing, but it kind of brought it into sharp relief for me. And unlike Disney, I do have ethics. And so my ethics have led me to believe that the only way that I can respond to this personally, and I admittedly won't have much impact, if any, on Disney's bottom line, but the only way that I can really, come at this from an ethical perspective is I'm going to say, okay, that's it. I am not going to review nor discuss any Disney IP or product or anything on this show ever again. As you know, as somebody who gets into the science fiction side of things quite frequently, that's going to suck out a bunch of my content, potentially, because they own Star Wars. They own the MCU, everything about the MCU, which is a lot right now. I cannot, in good conscience, sit here and give them free publicity. And I would certainly ask other YouTubers who have much more to lose, frankly, than I do. I would ask them to take up the same stance. Have some backbone, have some ethics. Say, no, I'm not going to give that free advertising to Disney. Never again. Until such time as they get their fingers out of China, and China, they stop being, we got to get that Chinese buck. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to discuss it. That doesn't mean I won't necessarily watch it, but I won't be paying for it. And I would suggest that you not pay for it either. I wouldn't want to advocate piracy because that would be wrong. But I certainly would suggest you not pay for anything that you watch. Don't go to theaters to see it. Don't watch it on Disney Plus. If you haven't already, cancel your Disney Plus subscription. If you got to watch it, do it some method other than Disney getting anything to pay for it. I'll put it this way. I'll be watching reviewers' screeners when I do mine. I don't necessarily know, but, you know, BitTorrent, excuse me, BitTorrent, pardon me, something along those lines. But I can't in good conscience give these guys any kind of free publicity anymore. I've got to draw a line somewhere and say, okay, well, you're not going to have ethics, but I'm going to. So please, other YouTubers, do the same. Do the same. I know it's a lot of content for the sci-fi and fantasy and superhero part of the world, but I think you really have to think to yourself, okay, is it good for me to be making money off of Disney? Is it good for me to be making money giving them free publicity, whether it's good or bad? Because there's no real such thing as bad publicity. You go out there and you scream about The Last Jedi, well, you're still giving them publicity for that. Drop 2 says, theaters, are they open again? Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Yes, I think probably the virus has probably killed movie theaters permanently, but we'll see. Drop 2 says, Ricky Gervais lambasted Apple at last year's Oscars for their hypocrisy. Yes, Ricky Gervais was great. He knew it was going to be his last time, and he just didn't care anymore. Pushing freedom and equality in the USA, but having their products made in Chinese sweatshops. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, they're all very, very hypocritical about it. And the thing about it is, if you're going to get almost any kind of smartphone or something like that, it's about impossible to find something that's actually made in the United States. But you can find ones that are made in South Korea, places like that. Certainly suggest you do that rather than using the ones that are necessarily made by a company that's explicitly going out and cuddling up with a country that is doing horrible things to its citizens and always has. But for me, I just can't talk about it anymore. I'm going to have to put my foot down and say, no, I'm just not going to talk about it. And that pains me a lot because they own some of my favorite stuff. One of my favorite movies of all time, the first Star Wars movie, which constantly jockeys between Star Wars, Superman 1978, and Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, as to which is my favorite at any given moment. Well, the only thing left is Star Trek II and Superman. Not that I'm going to say I'm never going to watch Star Wars again, but I won't be talking about it on here. When anniversaries of reviews come up, which will be happening with Empire Strikes Back, I won't be doing a review on it. I'd love to, but I can't. I got to have some ethics. I have to say to myself, no, I've got to tell these guys to go to hell in at least the little way that I can. And I can ask other YouTubers who probably will never see this to do the same thing. Have some ethics. Stand up and say, no, I am not going to give these guys free publicity anymore. It's done. Drop 2 says Democrats stole the last election, so why are Antifa still destroying Portland, Oregon, and Seattle? I couldn't tell you for sure about that. Near as I can tell, they're mostly real serious communists, and so they're trying to bring that about. I don't think. I mean, they're kind of lapdogs when they're useful to the Democrats. They're kind of lapdogs for them, but otherwise not so much. I think the Democrats are going to have to deal with them now that they're in power. So that's my take on Disney. I can't do those guys anymore. I can't talk about their old stuff. I might make an exception for Song of the South, just to be a jerk, and bring up the one property that they never want talked about again. Actually, I own a copy of it, believe it or not. There was something out there on BitTorrent. Excuse me, BitTorrent. Pardon me. There was something out there that I picked up, and I was like, "Oh wow!" Because I don't think it's ever been released on any media in the United States, but it was released once, I believe, on DVD in the UK, and there was a copy of it floating around. So I picked it up, not because I'm some kind of racist, but because I'm always curious about owning things that have been banned in some way or another. I figure, okay, if you're going to ban something like that, it's time for me to own a copy. Drop 2 says, also, Antifa wanted to distribute spoiled goods from the Fred Meyer stores in Portland to distribute to the homeless. Are they trying to wipe out the homeless? Oh, who the hell knows? Who the hell knows what their goals are? spoiled and out of code date can kind of be two different things. When I was in college, let me just take this off the Disney thing because I'm done ranting about that. When I was in college, I worked at a convenience store chain here in Lincoln, and I worked nights, which was horrifying. But I worked nights, and I had a friend who was just an incredible cheapskate. I mean, you would not believe it. And he used to come over every night and pick up all of the expired sandwiches and whatnot, that were in the refrigerators in there, and I was about to dump into the garbage. I would just hold them for him, and he would come and pick them up and take them home and eat them. Yeah, they were expired, but, the thing about the expiration date is the food's still going to be good for some time after that. So whether it's an expired code date is one thing. If it's an actual spoiled food, that's another. But handing out expired code date stuff isn't really that dangerous. Handing out stuff that's, clearly spoiling is another thing. Code date is a whole other thing. So. Yes, Drop 2 says, you have the Song of the South too. Yes, Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox and the Tar Baby. Yes, things you will not see, absolutely will not see today. Again, never released in the U.S. in any form that I'm aware of, but I'm happy to have a copy of it. And Brer is the southern form of brother. Yes, yeah, it's one of those movies that is a product of its time, and like. In the U.S., they've tried at various times. They have banned the book Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain on the basis that there's a black African-American character in there who's consistently referred to by the N-word. And, you look at it today and you go, that's really very, very insulting, but you have to keep it in the context of the time. And I think as long as you're keeping it in the context of the time, it's fine to have that stuff. And Song of the South is like one of those. It is a context of its time. Movie. You had to take it in the context of when it was made and what black people were expected to be at that time. Not judging it against modern standards. That's not the right way to go about it. You have to judge it against historical standards. And yes, the Song of the South does have some pretty good music. Absolutely. Yeah. I own a copy because it's banned. Okay. Other things, stuff is making it through the House. Some broad gun ban legislation is making it through the House. I don't know whether it'll pass the Senate. God, it could, very well could. And if it does, I'm sure that President Biden will sign it, and it will lead to outright confiscation. Guys, I have listened to two people in the United States say no. That's crossing the line, and that's where we have a civil war. I am no longer sure I believe any of those idiots. I think what most people are going to do is lose them in a boating accident. I think there's going to be a gigantic rash of boating accidents where people lose their guns. For myself, I don't know what I'll do exactly if that passes. I would hope somebody takes it to the Supreme Court, because I think that the Supreme Court would correctly rule that those laws are unconstitutional. But I don't know. They've let several million gun laws already be on the books without being challenged. So I don't know what will happen with that. And when they did Trump's impeachment, or rather his trial, that was clearly unconstitutional. All the Senate did was they said, we're going to vote that it's constitutional. Well, that's not how it works. The whole point of, the three tiers of government is for checks and balances to occur. And what that means is if one branch of the government, like the legislative branch, passes something that's obviously unconstitutional, the president is supposed to veto it on that basis. If the president fails to veto it, it can be challenged in court, and then the Supreme Court can say that it's unconstitutional. And the Supreme Court has, most recently as 2008, has affirmed that the Second Amendment is a personal right. It is an individual right, something that human beings as an individual have a right to own. I don't know how they'd rule. I don't know if it would even make it to the ruling stage, but I think what's probably going to happen is that a lot of people in the U.S. will have a lot of boating accidents. Hi, Dalton Brazier, and great to see you tonight. Oh, Freedom Fest is in Rapid City, South Dakota, so you'll be visiting South Dakota again. What's the dates on that? Because, of course, I am consider myself a South Dakotan living abroad. And if I have the time with other personal issues going on, I might want to go out there and take a look at it just for kicks. And, of course, there issues with getting raided for drug issues are considerably less in South Dakota, because South Dakota has recently made marijuana legal for use there, and are working on the various processes for getting like growing licenses and stuff like that, which I personally am looking very forward to. I think I can probably make a lot of money on that. One crop, sell it to the bikers before and after the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally. Goodbye. Oh, you've been bringing your wife to convince her to move to South Dakota. Cool. South Dakota is very much in my blood. Doesn't have a lot of cities. The largest one is, I guess, a couple of 100,000. I'm not sure what Sioux Falls is up to right now. But if you like wide open spaces, it's certainly the place to be. I always had a hard time finding a job there because it's a relatively small population, and so the number of jobs available tends to be a little lower. But it's certainly not impossible. If I was still looking, I am now consistently getting feelers from one of the big telephone companies and internet service providers to be working for them. So there's clearly something there for what I do. I don't know about other professions. So July sometime, I'll take a look. Oh boy, July. They decided to go out there during one of the hottest parts of the year. Beginning of August is really horrifying, but July can get pretty hot too. If it's in the Black Hills, it won't be so bad. You get up into the mountains and it isn't so horrible. But being in August at our family ranch land, it's 115 degrees in the shade, and because it's near a river and has a fair amount of humidity, it feels even worse. But it's not a bad place. I mean, hell, the bikers go up there the first week of August, so it's not bad. But I'll have to take a look. Driver 2 says Trump phones Pelosi. Pelosi, who's there? Trump. Owen. Pelosi. Owen who? Trump. Over 2. Funny meme going around. Yeah. Well, the whole point of that was not to actually impeach him in any way or punish him in any way. It was to make it so that he couldn't run for office again. I don't know if he'll even do that. But it was to make sure that he couldn't in the future. That was the whole point. That's why they unconstitutionally, just voted that it was constitutional. That's not how it works. That's not how it works, guys. If I were Trump, I'd be looking and seeing if there's a way I could take that to the Supreme Court and have the entire process declared unconstitutional. And it's not like it takes him off the hook. If they want to sue him in civil or criminal court, I'm not sure which it is, but if they want to sue him, they could. There's nothing, McConnell said so, that if they want to take it, privately, they can do that. Having watched an attorney here on YouTube talk about whether his legal opinion was if Trump had incited insurrection, he said he thought that would be very hard to convince a judge or jury of, because the precedent is that you leave a lot of leeway politically in terms of what people can say, and it's been done before. And he actually did say we're going to do this peacefully, repeatedly. So when you got that going on, and the fact that there's a lot of leeway that tends to be given for First Amendment rights, it might not even be possible to convict him, in a civil or criminal court. I don't know, but it would certainly be something that they could look at if they really wanted to get him. I would, of course, as always, mention, in addition to the stuff that they're doing with guns that at least risk a civil war, continue to risk it, the Democrats are, as always, out for blood, specifically mine. And I will just play, as I have for the last 2 or 3 weeks, what you could have gotten had you idiots in the Democratic Party not done something stupid.
The mob that stormed the Capitol on January 6th to try to stop Congress from carrying out its constitutional responsibilities were behaving like domestic enemies of our country. But let's be clear. The John Brennans, Adam Schiffs, and the oligarchs in big tech who are trying to undermine our constitutionally protected rights and turn our country into a police state with KGB-style surveillance are also domestic enemies, and much more powerful and therefore dangerous than the mob that stormed the Capitol. Now, John Brennan said,
So I know looking forward that the members of the Biden team who have been nominated or have been appointed are now moving in laser-like fashion to try to uncover as much as they can about what looks very similar to insurgency movements that we've seen overseas, where they germinate in different parts of a country and they gain strength, and it brings together an unholy alliance frequently of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, even libertarians.
Now, President Biden, I call upon you and all members of Congress from both parties to denounce these efforts by the likes of Brennan and others to take away our civil liberties that are endowed to us by our Creator and guaranteed in our Constitution. If you don't stand up to these people now, then our country will be in great peril.
That's what you could have had. That's who you could have had for president, potentially, if you guys in the Democratic Party had not colluded to make it impossible for her to run. That's what you could have had. Officially, Tulsi Gabbard, I am in love with you. If you're not feeling, happy in your current relationship, give me a call. I would very much like to meet with you and maybe do a little whining and dining. We have a lot in common in terms of what we believe, although, you're off on some things, but hey, nobody believes 100% what libertarians believe. But you're damn close at this point, which probably explains why you were left out. You are too centrist, too sane for the modern Democratic Party. They don't want you. They want idiots like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or Red Cortez, as I always refer to her on this show. Democrats continue to be out for blood, very specifically mine as a libertarian. Drop Truth asks, did you see the link I sent for you of the for Supervoid Cinema's Superman videos? There's some excellent videos there. Yes, I did. I haven't had a chance to look at it. It was a weird thing today, and it may show as I go through and do my content, but a weird thing happened today. I don't know how. It happens occasionally because I'm retired. I lost track of a day somewhere. Until about 4:30 today, I thought it was Wednesday. It's when I sat down to do my work, because I usually try to do all the prep work on this a day before. And I sat down and I looked at the date and went, holy crap, it's Thursday. I have to rush to get this in. So I don't have as many prepared remarks as I might ordinarily have. So I'm going to need my viewers' help to get through some of that, if you might get my indulgence. Again, they are out for blood. You could have had Tulsi Gabbard, someone sane, but you didn't. And look what we've got now. A guy who is clearly suffering from some level of senile dementia and will eventually resign and be followed by the first woman president who did not actually win a vote somewhere. Yes, I am doing a lot of winging it tonight, no question about that. Next thing I want to talk about is very simple. It's what it says down there. Oh, sorry. Let me get back to out of Tulsi Gabbard's card. I love you, Tulsi. Please call me. Certainly, I could segue in this way. Certainly, Hawaii is not anything like Nebraska in terms of its weather. But, hey, you can grow to love it. By the way, Dalton, similar deal with South Dakota. They're actually a little bit farther north of me. I'm in a weird band of weather in the United States that starts about where I consider the Nebraska-Kansas border to be and ends about where the Nebraska-South Dakota border is, and it extends all the way from the Rockies all the way to Chicagoland. I've seen it in action, where we have extremely variable weather. We get really, really hot summers, really, really cold winters, and sometimes, we can get a day where it's like 10 below, and then the next day, all of a sudden, it whips all the way up to 50, and then the next day, it's dropped down to 20, and, it just wildly vacillates sometimes. In the spring and, late spring and early fall, that happens all the time. You get up to South Dakota, it's just a bit farther north, that basically they have, some pretty hot summers, but when it gets to wintertime, it's just wintertime, and it's cold and a lot of snow. I seem to have a crush. I have two. One is Tulsi Gabbard. Again, we have a lot in common. She colors her hair and leaves that streak of white in it. I think that's her natural color. I think in order for her to look a little more authoritative, because she's certainly gives the impression of being much younger than I think she probably is. And I'm coloring my beard and leaving this white skunk beard part in here, I hope, because it makes me look a little bit authoritative. I'm coloring it because it comes in a patchy brown-white that looks really weird. The last time I tried just letting it grow in, you may have seen it on the show, and it looked weird, which is why I'm doing the dyeing of it now. Excuse me. New book coming out soon. Drop True says, How to Sleep Your Way into the Presidency by Kamala Harris. Yeah, I don't know. There's always these various rumors about who she slept with and stuff, but at the end of the day, she's just another politician, just another power-mad, sociopathic narcissist, and that's the way it goes. But segueing into the weather, about how it's very different from Hawaii, I've started to see nitwits, usually the Red Cortezes of the world, for example, talking about how this current cold snap, and it is a very large cold snap covering much more of the country than is usual, getting all the way down significantly into Texas, which is very unusual. It's definitely odd weather. There's no question about it. It's definitely odd weather. But guess what, guys? The one thing that it is not indicative of is climate change. I have an entire video out there called Debunked Climate Science is No Science. And that's because climate science does not in any way follow the scientific method. And since it doesn't follow the scientific method in any way, I walk through the many ways that it isn't following the scientific method, then you don't have a science. What you actually have is a religion. And that's not to be something where I'm saying to my viewers of faith that you shouldn't believe what you believe and all that. I'm saying it's the difference. You know, a science is something where you can concretely prove something through a methodical series of steps that can always be replicated. A faith is something that can't be proven. It just can't. You believe in God. Well, you can't prove to me scientifically that God exists. There's nothing wrong with your faith, but you can't prove it scientifically. That's the difference between a science and a faith. And with climate science, it doesn't actually follow the scientific method, so it therefore cannot be a science. It is only a faith, a religion. But even if you said that, you're still just looking at weather. I may be an old white cisgendered male, but I have also seen quite a lot of weather in my times. I don't remember how many blizzards that I have seen, real bad ones. I mean, here in Nebraska, where I live, the wind chill index last week, you know, because you get two types of temperatures. You have the regular air temperature, and then you have a wind chill. And that's because your air temperature may be one thing, it was like -8 or something like that. But the wind is blowing so hard that it feels like it was 26 below. That's what it felt like. It was the wind chill was 26 below for several days last week and into this week. And I discovered something because of that. My wonderful orange Jeep Wrangler, which can handle any terrain that you want to throw at it and has yet to be any kind of problem for me, wouldn't start with that wind chill. It was just too cold. Warmed up, you know, to where the actual, you know, wind chill temperature was around -5, and then it started up just fine. But when it's -27, that Jeep does not like it. I really should have been going out there, because I left it a couple of days. What I should have been going out there and doing is going out and starting it up a couple of times a day just to keep the engine warm. But I hadn't. So note to self, when it gets shockingly cold like this, go out and start the thing every, you know, a couple of times a day. Maybe in the evening as it starts to get really cold. Dalton Bridges says the difference between Christians and global warmists is that Christians aren't trying to destroy America because of its faith. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about the global warming cult, really, I guess that's what you'd call it. I can't give it the same name as a religious faith. A faith, to me, I have respect for. I have no respect for the climate science cult. I have no respect for them at all. I have no more respect for the climate science cult than I do Scientologists. Scientology is a cult. It is a money-grabbing cult. There's just no question about it in my mind. Sorry, Kirstie Alley, but that's true. From what I can see of objective reality, that's what it is. Same thing with the climate change cult. It is a cult, and it has no relationship to reality. Drop 2 says, you can't prove the universe came from nothing, exploding either. I don't know anyone who was there. Do you? This theory is also disproved by the first law of thermodynamics. The only thing I would point out is that the entire Big Bang Theory, which I also don't believe probably occurred, because we're seeing more and more evidence that it didn't. But that was actually put forth by a member of some clergy, I've forgotten whom now, because they wanted to reconcile what we were observing about the universe with the book of Genesis, the whole let there be light thing. And that's where that originally came from. So when you say it can't be proven, well, yeah, you can't, but you have to remember the historical context it came from. And at the same time, personally, I think that we have more and more evidence coming that, shows that it probably wasn't a Big Bang. What we know about the universe is a lot more complicated, or what we don't know about the universe is far more complicated and complex than what little we do know. Our own observations scientifically are very, very limited, really. When you look at the entirety of the, 13 billion plus age of the universe, there's going to be a lot of stuff out there that we have never seen, and it's going to raise a lot of questions, and already has in many, many cases. Nobody can figure out gravity, right? Things like that. We have a lot of theories, but nobody can really figure it out exactly for sure. They haven't been able to yet. We're learning more and more all the time, but the universe is a gigantic place. It's big. I mean, really big. You might think it's a long walk down to the chemist to get a packet of peanuts, but that's just nothing compared to space. It is huge. There is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, when they have the total perspective vortex, where you're put into a machine that has simulated the entire enormous infinity of the universe. And you are plugged into it so that you see your place in it. And you are an invisible dot on an invisible dot with a tiny little marker that says, you are here. And that's the size of the universe. There are things going on out there that we don't understand and may never understand. It's just too big. It's too big. So there may have been no Big Bang. There's a lot of evidence pointing to that now. It was a useful theory for quite some time. But even when you get into things like the formations of galaxies, formations of solar systems, you start to run into problems where gravity isn't keeping things together the way that it should, according to calculations. And when you get into that, you can do what they have done, which is fudge factors. They introduce things that cannot be observed, like dark matter, dark energy, to account for the fact that gravity isn't holding things together the way it should. But these are just fudge factors. They're like magic. They've been thrown in to make the calculations make sense. Well, I say, if you have to throw in things like that to make the calculations make sense, maybe it's time to pull back and look at the evidence that you got and come up with a new theory. Maybe there's something wrong with your theory if you keep having to throw fudge factors in. So, Dr. 2 says Teilhard de Chardin was the Jesuit who also involved in the frauds of Peking Man and Piltdown Man. Okay, I don't know anything about those. I'm ignorant of that stuff. I have very, very little religious knowledge, and what I do know I got from going to Mass with my ex for 13 years. As my regular viewers know, I'm otherwise an atheist. But I'm not one of those atheists with a chip on my shoulder. If you want to believe something, hey, fine, believe it, as long as you don't have to hurt innocent people who are not doing anything to you in the process. Believe whatever you like. I'm fine with it. Anyway, with regards to this weather, this is just weather. The reason that people are so susceptible to this is that they have spent 12 years of compulsory education in the United States, not being educated, but being indoctrinated. And one of the things that they're indoctrinated to is this concept of climate change, global warming, whatever the hell they want to call it, in any given year, because it's not working out the way they thought it was going to work out. And I mean, Al Gore came out with his stupid and inconvenient truth in, I believe, 2004. And he was saying that by like 2010, 2014, something around that range, half of the East Coast was going to be underwater and blah, 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 blah. And none of it ever came true. None of the predictions ever come true. That's part of why it doesn't fall into the realm of science. A science has to be accurate in its predictions. You have to make a prediction and then it has to come true. And if you can't predict things accurately, which climate science has never done, you're off the scientific method. Your predictions are consistently wrong. So it doesn't follow the scientific method. I forgot to, but I'll put a link to my video where I talk about it. And I'm seriously considering re-recording that video. It was made at a time when I didn't have quite the level of production values that I do now. I think it was 720p, 10 frames per second, probably too close on me to look good. And it's got my hat in it, so I'm seriously toying with making a new one that is a little bit updated video. And maybe a little more approachable to people, or at least piss people off more, which I'm sure it would to the climate cult idiots. But it's not a science, and the problem really is that our education, I go back to education constantly all the freaking time in this show, because I've been close to it and around it my entire life. The problem is that people were not educated in the scientific method. They were not educated in science, not really. You maybe take a dumbed-down high school biology class, to satisfy some requirement, but that doesn't really give you an indication of what science is, and how to recognize scientific or pseudoscientific claptrap when you see it. And climate science is pseudoscientific claptrap. Let's see, Drop Truth says, in my youth, less than 25. Yeah. Oh, man. I've got some reactors that I watch now. I am getting so old. These kids are younger by a couple of years than my oldest kid. Oh, I feel so old. And I'm totally impossible for me to tell how old they are, too. I've lost that ability beyond a certain point. But in your youth, Drop Truth, less than 25, summers in Australia started in mid to late November. Now they start in December. They're much wetter, like the tropical zone rather than the temperate zone. I never know what to make of some of that. The reality is that we do have the change in climate going on all the time. The problem is that operates in geological time and not in human lifetimes. I have seen lots and lots of very bad winters. I mean, really bad winters. Here, where I live, the temperature was a little worse than usual, but not horrifyingly so. It was a little bit worse than usual last week, but not incredibly so. And it was off by a couple of 3 weeks. Ordinarily, we'd get that in January. But getting it in February is not unusual. We can have that too. Here we get this sort of crap all the time. Chicago, where I lived, I think it was 1991 when there was a horrific blizzard there that I'll never forget, because by that time I'd been living there long enough that I knew what the expressways usually look like. That's what they call freeways in Chicagoland. What the expressways look like normally under normal traffic. And so when we had this really horrific blizzard, that got the expressway that is Lakeshore Drive stopped, just dead stopped because of the snow. I feel, okay, this is horrible. This was my ex at the time. We had to get off, find a side street to park the car, and then walk to the L so that we could take that back to my apartment. I wished, frankly, that I'd just taken the L downtown to meet her rather than driving her up. I don't know why I didn't. I was thinking to myself, this ain't going to be no big deal. Oh, terrible, terrible, terrible one. You can go back, way back, outside of my lifetime and see very bad winters. If you go back to the 30s, if you want to talk really bad summers, go back to the 30s, the Dust Bowl, things like that. We have seen this for my entire lifetime, for my father's lifetime, for my grandfather's lifetime, for my great-grandfather's lifetime. We've seen this over and over and over. My great-grandfather's lifetime was interesting, also inside my grandmother's. He was one of the last pioneers of western South Dakota. One of the last guys that came out there in a covered wagon. And he had cattle that he grazed. And during the Dust Bowl, when nothing was growing, he would take them to the Badlands of South Dakota, which is now a national monument. And up on the top of the Badlands, it's a flattened off area generally, there was grass growing. That's where he herded his cattle to graze, because the summer was so bad that nothing was growing whatsoever. This stuff goes on all the time. In my lifetime, outside of my lifetime, it'll happen again. It is just stuff that happens. This is weather. This is what we call weather. It has absolutely nothing to do with climate change. This is weather. That's all it is. Let's see. Drop 2 says the term Big Bang was coined by the British astronomer Fred Hoyle as a joke. Yes, I remember he said the same thing too about black holes and singularities, which was mathematically could they exist? Yes, but did he believe they existed in real life? Probably not. And the nature of black holes has changed over my lifetime too. It used to be that everything was sucked into a black hole, nothing got out. Then we started looking at what we thought were black holes with radio telescopes and discovered that they were spewing out X-rays and dragging things in sort of a circular pattern around them and spewing out X-rays. Well, you shouldn't be able to spew out X-rays if nothing that can go out of it that isn't faster than light. So there are now some alternative theories that would not only explain those as not being things like black holes and mathematical singularities, which are fun math, but you have to say, you always have to remember the math is there to approximate reality. The math is not reality itself. It is there to approximate reality. So when you see something that just doesn't frankly make any level of sense, it's just cool math, you start looking back at what your initial theory was. And when you do that, there are some electrical engineers and people along those lines who plasma engineers who believe that they can account for this by the way that plasma works. Plasma is actually a fourth state of matter. You have solid, liquid, gas, and then plasma. It is an ionized state of matter. And they think that they can explain some of these things and account for the fact that gravity is no longer working the way that the theories say. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's true, but as somebody who started out working with a lot of electronics and electricity, I find it compelling. They call it the electric universe. Feel free to go out and look that up. There's some nice channels on YouTube. Again, don't really know. I can't personally say that this is something that I would totally buy into or anything like that, but I find the arguments compelling from a scientific perspective. Let's see, scroll back up here a little bit. Drop 2 says, this summer is on the way to becoming the wettest in recorded history. Flash floods, very heavy rain, etc. When summer has ended, you'll let me know. Probably wouldn't be surprised if it ended about the same time as our winter. We've got a ton of precipitation. They were worried for a long time that there wouldn't be enough precipitation for the to have good grazing areas for cattle. I don't think we're worrying about that anymore. Super Cruise 63 says, yesterday was the sad day when we lost Rush Limbaugh. He opened up the world of talk radio like no other. Was a great voice for America. Rush is the reason that I'm a libertarian. When I first came to Chicago, I was a diehard, crazy communist actor, like they all are. Top to bottom, that profession is nothing but communists. And when I got there, I started listening to him because I was driving around a lot. I was an international courier between Chicago and Toronto, which meant I drove around the Chicago Loop quite a lot. It's been several hours. And I would be listening to him as I got in and out from my deliveries. And I used to think he was completely insane. Then I started listening to him, and he started to make sense. And for a couple of years, I was voting Republican on that basis, several years. Then I discovered libertarianism, and I thought, well, Rush he's got a good idea as a basis to start from. And I no longer agreed with everything he said. Frankly, there were times at which I found him a bit on the annoying side because I couldn't believe what he believed anymore. But when you look, too, at the state of radio before he came in, he changed radio completely. Think what you like the man of his politics, all that, doesn't matter. He fundamentally changed radio, AM radio. AM radio had for decades been the home of things like music. But because FM had come out and FM had stereo and it had much better sound, AM radio was really pretty much on its way out. But then Rush Limbaugh came in and basically created the format of the talk radio program. Anybody who is running talk radio right now, owes their career to Rush Limbaugh. Whether you're liberal, conservative, libertarian, whatever. You owe your career, if you're on the radio, to Rush Limbaugh. To some extent, I owe it. Because when you get into alternative media, like doing shows on YouTube and videos on YouTube that delve into politics and things like that, you're dealing with something that was heavily influenced by him. I look at, what my influences are, right? And if you see it in my very earliest videos, you can see my influences when I'm doing reviews, when I first started doing reviews, was red letter media. You know, they really did change the landscape in terms of how things were reviewed. It opened up reviewing for everyone on YouTube. They changed that landscape. Rush Limbaugh changed the landscape when it came to talk radio. He saved AM radio, probably single-handedly, and created many, many, many different people who had all kinds of different careers because of what he did in radio. If for nothing else, if you hate the man for his politics, nothing else, he was a radio pioneer who deserves an enormous amount of credit for having resuscitated AM radio and creating the talk show format as we know it today. Without him, we would not have any of this. I might not be doing what I'm doing. I wouldn't necessarily say he's a direct, somebody I directly drew inspiration from in terms of what I do. He's in the lineage. You could say, okay, he started this, and other people were doing it, kind of filtered down to this alternative stuff, and now I'm here. I owe something of my existence in terms of having this channel to Rush Limbaugh. There's no question in my mind. Absolute pioneer in radio, regardless of what you think about his politics. Absolute pioneer in radio, and definitely unfortunate to see him go. Of course, we'd known, that he was going to go for quite a long time. I was frankly amazed that he worked as long as he did. When you look at the amount of time between when he stopped working and when he passed away, that's a very short period of time. The guy must have just been killing himself, to keep going on radio. So, hats off to you, Rush. Sorry to see you go. Didn't necessarily agree with your politics, but by God, what you accomplished in your lifetime was quite amazing. Sorry to see you go, buddy. Let's see. By the way, also hi to you as well, Super Cruise 63. Drop of Truth says, with the Oliver Stone movie, talk radio based on little Rush Limbaugh. I don't know. I haven't watched that film, so I don't know. Drop of Truth says, remember the Disney's The Black Hole. The first and second acts were great. The third act was stupid. Yeah, that ending of The Black Hole. It only made sense if you read the novel, and I think because the novel added sense to it that it never actually had. I think if you watch the movie, you're like, okay, so wait, the good guys went on to become angels, and the bad guys went on to go to hell or something? What? Very weird movie, no question. But it was pretty dark in some ways, yeah, for children's Disney movies. I mean, it wasn't, there wasn't any blood and gore and guts and veins in their teeth and eating dead, burnt bodies. But that ending, sure. And, you had zombies, basically, and things like that. Nothing graphic, but, yeah, very different for Disney at that time. Drop 2 says, you can still change the landscape of film reviews yourself, Bill, if you include a breakdown, cinematography, acting, etc. Yeah, and I'd like to be doing that more. I would like to be doing that a lot more. I will probably do it with movies that are special to me in some way. When I was doing nothing but reviews, I would try to do very detailed breakdowns of what I saw here, what I saw there, and who did what. It really was what, set me apart from other reviewers. The problem is, the woke will not just let me do that. And unfortunately, I also think I have things to say political that maybe a lot of people aren't saying. So that's why I tend to do a lot of politics with very brief reviews like I'm going to do for Batwoman later tonight. But yes, weird and old, wonderful old films. I have a whole list of films that pop up when they're on their anniversaries because that's when I generally like to do them. But again, it would be one thing if I had the time. A couple of years ago, I was trying out doing a show every single day, doing a live stream every single day with a new review every single day. I don't have the time for that personally. There may come a time in the future when I do have the time personally. Right now, I can't devote it. I can just do this Thursday night live stream. It's really all I can do. Hi, Starcheese Blair. How's life treating you tonight? The moment we're just talking about how we don't have climate change, we just have weather. I don't know what the records are for Texas. I know this is really bad for them. I know they've had some serious problems with getting power to a lot of people. But that appears to be, and I listened to one of their officials talk about the detail involved in how that broke down. Ultimately, it devolves to the fact that they're using too much renewables. Wind and solar suck in this kind of weather. It's just that simple. You're not going to get the power out of them. If you want to get away from fossil fuels, there is one and only one option, and that is nuclear. That is the only option that you have. If you want to get away and have clean energy, fossil fuels, get away from fossil fuels, and make things better for the environment, the only way to go is nuclear. You just forget about all this crap with renewables. That's ridiculous. It doesn't have the amount of energy density. It doesn't have the ability to work in really bad weather and things like that. It is unreliable. If you want reliable, clean, safe energy, nuclear is the only way to go. I hope that they have learned that lesson in Texas, and you will start building nuclear plants, for God's sake. They really are clean. They really are safe. They really do generate a crap ton of energy, more than you'll ever need. And I would like to see more research being done into making them smaller. What I would really ultimately someday like to live to see would be a nuclear generation plant in your home. Something the size of your hot water heater or your furnace that is generating enough energy and electricity to be safe and sitting in your basement. That's what I'd really like to see. Whether or not that's scientifically possible right now, I don't know, maybe not. But I think it's something that should be researched very, very heavily. But don't rely on these renewable energy. They just aren't that reliable. You need nuclear. If you want to save the environment, go nuclear. Supercruise 63 is saying, hell, on my face when I say Batwoman. Starseeds player, this must be some kind of record in Texas. Oh, I'm sure it is some kind of record. The thing about it is our records really don't go back that far. Accurate temperature records don't go back to about the 1950s, because that's when the digital thermometer was invented. Before that, it used water and mercury-based thermometers that even on the best of them, the ones used by the Naval Observatory, which is the standard for time, it could be off half a degree or more, and you would, where my grandfather went out and pioneered, if he used the thermometers at the time, all you could really say was it was about 90. It's about 95, because those things were so bad they could be off a couple of 3 degrees in any direction. You would never have an accurate temperature reading out there, and still probably don't. The accurate readings that we have really only go back to the beginning of the digital thermometer. And you're still talking about records that only go back as far as we have been keeping them. If you were go back in time 200 years, 400 years, 1,000 years, God knows what you'd find. You might find that this is something that, it happens every once in a while. It's pretty rare. But we're still talking about weather and climate that operates in geological terms. The time it takes to, flatten mountains down to sand. That's the time period we're talking about, not the time period of human beings' lifetime. If there is some kind of climate change going on, we will not see it. Nobody alive will ever see it. No, currently alive. Not me, not my kids, not my niece and my grandniece and my grandnephew. None of them will see it, because any climate change that happens, and it's always happening, any climate change that happens is happening in geological time, not in human time. And I'm sure even with Texas, if you went back far enough before we started keeping records, there were probably really bad winters that might make this one look worse. Occasionally, not very often because they're too far south, but you're not talking about, a time period that we really have that much time on. A few hundred years, that's nothing. That is nothing in terms of time. Just nothing. Nothing we have in our own lifetimes, anybody alive, is ever going to be enough time to see it. Let's see. Starship Player, I did not know Texas used a lot of renewables. Well, when I was hearing this guy talk about it, apparently they use more renewables by a couple of factors than they do fossil at this point. And that's part of what bit them in the ass. They did not have adequate fossil fuel generators to take over when the wind and solar died. And so that's part of where they are. It's a bit more complicated than that, but their reliance on renewables screwed them over. Just no question about it. Drop True says, the YouTube video, Deborah Tavares, Weather Warfare, The Great White Death of 1949. Yes, and Texas Snowstorm, Winter Storm is worth watching, an upside rainbow to boot. Yes, 1949 was a bad year all the way around. You can find lots and lots of pictures of various blizzards and stuff that happened then. I remember one in the 1970s here that was just really bad. It's one of the first really bad ones that I remember. I was a child. This just happens from time to time. That's all there is to it. Drop It saying they don't use a lot of renewables. Well, when I was listening to this guy talking about it today, it sounds like they use too much. It is too much, and when it failed, they did not have appropriate fossil to get it to work. Going to shut down the Diablo nuclear power plant here in the PRC in a few years. Well, hopefully they'll open some others. That is the only alternative. Nuclear is the only way to go. Robert Who says Biden is sending emergency diesel generators to Texas now. No viable renewable options. Color me shocked. Yeah. Well, yeah. It's not reliable. At the best of times, it's not reliable. Super Goose 63 says, when are we going to have brownouts? Then what are we going to have? We're going to do what we already have brownouts. I don't know. I don't know what things are going to look like in California. I know it's a non-issue here. We have all kinds of fossil, and we have a nuclear power plant that's been running most of my life in Nebraska. So really, it's kind of a non-issue for us. And it isn't for them, but I think they're going to learn the lesson from it. I hope the lesson that they learn is that you need nuclear. You morons. Check out Rex Research for the radium battery and similar. Yeah, there's all kinds of things that we could be doing out there in terms of exploiting nuclear, nuclear processes. There's no question in my mind, and radioactive materials. There's no question in my mind. The real problem is what happened with that. If you go back and look at the history of it. 1945, dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Shocked an entire generation of people. They'd been having bad war up until that point, and while most of them weren't against dropping the atomic bomb on Japan for a number of reasons, it shocked them. The sheer, mass destruction of it. One bomb, most of a city gone. One bomb. It shocked them. It terrified them. That carried over into their children, the boomers and the hippies of that period. And so that carried over another generation, basically into mine, where we were all afraid of this stuff. Not me, because I know the science behind it and I know it wasn't a problem. But most people of my generation and prior, between World War II and then, just terrified of this stuff. Fortunately, as you get farther and farther away from the initial shock of what it did, the generations become more and more open to other scientific things like nuclear. Never forget, I picked up a couple of hippies one time, which I didn't even know existed still. But I picked up a couple of hippies one time, and I drove them for several hours, and they were talking about nuclear. I was like, whoa, man, that's totally different than your grandparents' hippies. But I thought, that's great. If the hippies of the modern world are saying that nuclear is the way to go, we may have some chance of it actually happening. So I was thrilled with that. You don't care much about what happens in California. You're moving to Colorado soon. Well, good for you. Colorado, I've not spent a ton of time there. Most of the time I spent there was in Denver area, but I've always liked that. One of my kids is in Colorado Springs, and seems to like that well. So I have no problems with Colorado. It looks like a nice state to me. But if you're escaping the PRC, good for you. I think you're making a good choice. I don't see their communist and socialist doctrines making that place any better. So again, what we're dealing with here ultimately is not climate change. It's just weather. And unfortunately, when you're 20 years old and you've spent 12 years of your life being indoctrinated that, climate change is happening, and we're all only a few years away from being dead of heat stroke or, who knows, flooding on the coast or whatever the hell nonsense they're peddling now. and you don't have the life experience of someone like me or older who has seen this over and over and over again, you start thinking to yourself that this is something incredibly unique. And also you have political leaders who are only out for the power that it gives them, who are telling you that it's unique. This isn't unique. It really isn't. It's very unusual when you get down to Texas, but not unique. This is not something where we can say, oh, look at this. It means climate change is happening. No, this means we had some bad weather. That's all this really is. It's bad weather that impacted a lot of people in a bad way, but it is not climate change. It's just weather. Super Cruise 63 says Japan is almost completely nuclear powered. More should follow suit. I've said a million times, if it was me, I would set up a whole bunch of nuclear plants out in Wyoming. You can get the water by drilling straight down to the Platte Reservoir, which is where we get all of our water from here to there. You can put them out in the middle of nowhere, so if something bad happened, well, okay, it's not going to contaminate much of anything. In the event, because you're not on a seismic fault or anything like that, so that's not likely to happen like it did in Japan. So if something bad happened, the worst thing that could happen, frankly, would be if the Yellowstone caldera blew. Well, if the Yellowstone caldera blows, there is pyroclastic flow, which is superheated gas and ash. That the last time that sucker blew apparently went all the way across the entire, and it's superheated gas that's coming at you at the speed of sound. So it's coming down at Mach 1 or better and just rolling over everything in its path. And the last time it did it appears to have gone at least halfway through South Dakota and maybe more. And a good chunk of Nebraska. If the Yellowstone caldera blows, those plants are not going to be a problem. Plants in Wyoming are just going to be obliterated by this massive wave of ash and superheated ash and smoke moving at the speed of sound. They'll just be obliterated. It won't even be like a nuclear accident. Just whoosh, gone. Any nuclear thing that happened doesn't matter because it will have been completely engulfed. Try dropping a nuclear reactor into a volcano, Okay, yeah. Erupting volcano is not going to have, reactor dead, just all there is to it. Yes, Japan also uses tidal power as well. Hi, Marshall, and you're cold where you are. Well, let me look at what it is right this second. Earlier this week, don't have that, forget that. Sorry. It's getting warmer here. Last week we had a low of about -10 with a wind chill of around -27. Right now we're all the way up to 14 degrees Fahrenheit with a wind chill of about 7 degrees. That's pretty good for the last couple of weeks. But as I was saying, it's not even unusual, particularly around here. We get that. It sucks sometimes. Where I live, you have to be prepared to be going out with everything covered, because if you don't, you really do risk frostbite in a very short period of time, a matter of minutes. If you went out with nothing, street clothes, jeans and a t-shirt, and you stood there, you would be getting frostbite in a few minutes, hypothermia not too much after that, and then death. You have to be covered up. Everybody here has that kind of thing. I can understand where you're at, Marshall, where you're probably unused to that. But it's been cold. It's not horrifyingly cold here, but it's an unusual patch of weather. It's an unusual patch of weather that impacted people in Texas for a complex series of reasons, much of which devolved to too much reliance on renewable energy that is not reliable. If they'd not been so reliant on that, it would have been a problem. And again, the only way to get away from fossil fuels is nuclear power. Period. End of story. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Red Cortez, if you want to do something for the environment, get lots of nuke plants going. Let's see. Super Cruise 63 says, hate to say it, but we had at least a foot of sunshine here. Well, it's not that bad where you are, seriously? Okay, well, it's cold everywhere. It's colder everywhere right now in North America. But for me, not so much. it's a bad winter, but we've seen worse. I've seen worse. I've seen worse. The problem again is that our kids, our grandchildren, have been grown up with 12 years of compulsory education where they've been taught that the doctrine of the climate change cult, and so they don't know that what we're seeing is not that unusual. Guys, you always want to come down on me, and those of us in my generation, old white cisgendered males who don't know what the real world should be looking like, what new civilization you want to create. Well, I got to tell you guys, we actually do know a little more than you think, because we've lived through some of this already. And we go, oh, well, this is just like 1992. This is just like 1947. This is just like, go back as far as you want. We've seen this over and over. It's unusual. It's a little bad, worse down in Texas than I think I've seen it, but it's just weather. This is not climate change. This is just weather. Crypto 1701, nice to see you here tonight. Fusion will be awesome. We'll have to see. Fusion is one of those things that's very, very difficult to achieve. If they ever do, that would be great. They've been working on it most of my life in some fashion or another. Excuse me, whether or not they'll ever get it to work in my lifetime, I don't know. If they do, yeah, that will be cool. But until then, nuclear fission will provide more energy than we will ever need for a long time. Just a few plants, and we can totally replace fossil plants and, do a world of good for the environment if you're really into that. And at the same time, we'll have more energy than we know what to do with. Marcel says, Bitcoin update, crypto update. Bitcoin is over 51,000 and Ethereum is over 1,900. Why am I not shocked? I'm not shocked anymore. It'll go up to a point where people will say, oh my God, it's too high, and start selling, and then it'll drop to the basements. Super Cruise 63 says cold fusion would be idealistic. Idealistic, yes. I don't know if that's feasible. However, if you look up some of the stuff I was talking about, the electric universe, and how I find some of that compelling, that would predict cold fusion being possible under certain circumstances. Again, something to look at, I think, is an alternative, but hard for me to tell whether or not to buy into it, but I just find it compelling because of my background. Crypto 17.1 says it's been a long time since it's froze in southern Texas. Oh, sure, absolutely. This is very unusual weather when you get down to the far south. No question, very unusual weather. But it's not all that unique. When I'm sure if you were looking at a time period of 500 years, you would see these things happening over and over again. Maybe not on a cyclical basis, just from time to time you're going to get them. Maybe not within anybody's lifetime, maybe not every 100 years, maybe every 200 years, something like that. But this is weather. It just happens. Sometimes it's bad. There's nothing around that. LFTR would be a better alternative. Yes, for cold fusion. I think in the near term, that's certainly true. Drop of 2 says it's nice where you live in Australia. 86 degrees Fahrenheit, 30 Celsius. Yeah, I'd go for that right now for sure. Maybe I should winter in Australia. The miniature fission plants are cool, and cool semiconductors. Yes, lots of work going on there. It remains to be seen whether it's something that's feasible with current technology. It may be that we have to wait a generation or two. I don't know. I know that it's very, very difficult to get to happen. I know that. But in the meantime, fission is fine. We can do all kinds of cool things with fission, no question about that. Lots and lots of energy that we can create with that. And it's reliable, it's safe, it doesn't matter what the weather outside is like. As long as it's constructed properly, it doesn't matter, it's going to work. And there's no reason that we can't use them, other than fear of stuff that'll never happen. Meltdown does not cause an explosion. Those things don't blow up. And they're so well engineered now, the modern ones are so well engineered that I don't think you'll ever see a problem with them, short of sticking them on a fault line and having an earthquake of massive proportions. So, Starseeds Player, I don't really understand cryptocurrency as an investment. Me, neither. Other than to say, to me it's totally unpredictable. But if I had a time machine, I'd go back to the year 2000 and tell my younger self, when this stuff first comes out, buy, and then sell it about now and become a freaking billionaire. Crypto 1701, let's extrapolate a million or so years of data from 100 years. Yeah, that's exactly right. I keep telling, when you want to look at climate change, what you really need to do is take very, very accurate measurements, many, many different places around the world, more than we are now, from here through the next ice age, and then back to about where we are again. When you have that, then you can start to make short-term predictions. Not long-term ones, short-term ones. Go through multiple ice ages, 50, 100,000 years, something like that. And then maybe you can start to do, make some kind of predictions that are a bit more long-term. But what we've got now really is only accurate data from a very limited number of places that only goes back to the invention of the digital thermometer. Before then, we didn't have accurate measurements. Marshall saying, and in medical news, miraculously, hydroxychloroquine is suddenly and expectedly fine for people to take as a prophylaxis for the virus with zinc right after the inauguration. Odd, huh? Not really. That's how our people in the press work. They are propagandists of the lowest order. Yeah, Marshall says you'd be happy to come on next week and explain why around cryptos you finally figured it out. I would be very interested to have you on for that, Marshall. Let's set that up. I'd be very interested to have you on for that. Crypto 17 says Russia screwed theirs up. Our plans are so much better. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Every time that they have an issue, they re-engineer it to get rid of the issues. It's the same with anything that you engineer. And the way they are now is so close to damn foolproof. Like I said, as long as you don't put them someplace stupid, like on a fault line, where you could have problems, you're fine. Which is why I suggest the middle of Wyoming. Starseeds Blair, did you hear that they made room temperature superconductor a couple months ago? Required insane pressure, but it was neat. Yeah, I hadn't heard it, but that doesn't shock me. Stuff like that is coming up all the time. All kinds of different things are coming, scientific things are happening, and very rapidly, such that I can't even keep track of all of them. I'm an IT guy. I can barely keep track of what's going on there. Any immortals here? They could tell us about the weather. Yeah. Yes, we need some immortals running around. Reminds you of the brilliant film Brainstorm, Drop of Truth says. Yeah, that's one of my favorite movies, too. No good reason for it, but I like the film. It was shot with some very experimental cinematography and was intended to be a showcase for a technology that didn't really pan out for a variety of reasons. But I like the movie quite a lot. Christopher Walken seems like a normal guy in it for the most part. And Natalie Wood was great at her age at that time. So what we got is nothing unusual. It's just weather. And if you think otherwise, you have unfortunately been indoctrinated into the cult of climate change. There is no climate change going on here. This is just weather. It's suckage weather, but it's just weather. Brainstorm was filmed there in North Carolina. Cool. I didn't know that. I didn't know for sure where that was shot. I just know that was like they hadn't quite finished production on that film when Natalie Wood died under mysterious circumstances or questionable circumstances. And some of what they did at the end was to cover that fact that they hadn't quite finished principal photography on it. So, got about an hour and a half in. Moving on, Gina Carano. Oh, Gina Carano, talked about her last week. Another woman, along with Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. I have developed a distinct affection. I've fallen in love with her. I have fallen in love with Gina Carano. There's no question about it. Which technology in Brainstorm? Not sure which money's meaning there necessarily, but they had all kinds of room temperature superconductors and stuff. I don't know if you know the movie Brainstorm, but it was basically a technology that allowed you to feel another person's emotions, see their thoughts and things see their memories and things like that. Some very, very interesting uses of that technology that when you watch the movie, you go, oh, I could see that happening in real life. kind of a porn use for it that's kind of interesting. Gina is #1 rated on IMDb right now. Good for her. I was falling in love with her after she really came to my attention when she was canceled. And then several days later, she uncanceled herself. She inked a deal with Ben Shapiro and his company to produce original content for them. I think Ben Shapiro is starting to build himself a little media empire, and I think he's trying to get people who are disaffected but talented to come to him. Ben, if you're watching, for God's sake, get Kevin Sorbo. Get Kevin Sorbo. That guy has been completely blacklisted and canceled because he is a devout Christian. That's the only reason. Get that man. He can act. Get him in your network. You know, if you're going to start up a network with talented people, get Kevin Sorbo. He's a good guy. Get him. Kevin, if you're watching, call Ben Shapiro. I think you have an opportunity here to finally get some work after a while. But yes, Gina trending #1. That's awesome. Came to my attention mostly, as I said. I mean, I'd known her from watching the show that belonging to that company whose shows, for ethical reasons, I will no longer discuss nor review. But it came to my attention there. But she really came to my attention last week when she was canceled. But then she uncanceled herself and said one of those brilliant quotes. Sits right here. They can't cancel us if we don't let them. Wonderful, wonderful quote. And all of this, you know, the fact that she was, because she hits the same two sides of my show. You know, part of my show has a foot in science fiction. Part of my show has a foot in politics. Well, here's a woman who had done a great job on that show and then successfully told the woke to go screw themselves. I love that. Successfully telling the woke to go screw themselves. The first person that I'm aware of that really did that got canceled out of a major project and said, screw you, I'm going elsewhere, and successfully did it. Now, I don't know for sure. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to subscribe. I'm going to spend actual money to subscribe to Ben Shapiro's service because I want to support this. I want to support seeing disaffected people who have been canceled going to his network and being able to produce their content. Now, Gina Carano, man, I want to have you on my show so bad. The problem is that much like Tulsi Gabbard, my first question, if I have you on, is going to be, so tell me, are you, happy in your current relationship? And if not, do you have a thing maybe for much older men in questionable physical condition? But Gina Carano, I love you. You have done what I thought would be impossible. I thought you were screwed. I thought you were going to hopefully just rest on whatever money you had. And you said no. You said, by God, no. I'm not going to let them cancel me. They can't cancel us if we don't let them. There are other opportunities. And so good on you. Love you for having done that. Awesome, 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 awesome. Love you, Gina Carano. Just absolutely love you. 1701, conservatives do fight back, and Sorbo is awesome. Yes. Sorbo is a friend of my pseudo, I think I can say that. Tell me if I can say that. It's one of the viewers watching right now. Brainstorm utilized a room temperature superconductor in their brain scanning goggles. Yes, they did that. Yeah, I hadn't remembered exactly what the technology was, other than as the movie got moved along, the technology got smaller and smaller and more portable and stuff like that, which makes sense when you're doing that kind of research. I would mention that Gina Carano has a number of films. I don't think it's all of them, but a number of films that are free on Tubi TV right now, free with ads. I have links to them below. One is to a general search list that will give you back all of the films that she's in, some of which are sort of documentaries about her time in MMA, some of which are outright movies where she has some, has roles. My personal favorite of the ones that I've seen there is probably the film Haywire, and I have a link to that below as well, to that film specifically. Okay, yeah. You've texted in with my suggestion already? Well, cool. Kevin Sorbo is a friend of my sometimes pseudo-producer, J. Marshall Presnell. We have both talked about how, Sorbo has really been blacklisted. He was forced to do the single worst modern film I have ever seen. Called, wow, I've actually started to blank it out of my mind because it's so bad. It's a libertarian science fiction movie called Alongside Night. The producer / director he's passed away now, a guy who was fairly legendary in libertarian circles. I knew him, and I reviewed his film once because it's so bad. And I hate to, speak ill of the dead, but it's the Plan 9 of outer space of 2012. The thing was shot, I believe, in 2012, and it's terrible. You could basically call it libertarian set piece, the motion picture, only not that good. If you're not a libertarian, you'll be completely confused about what's going on. If you are a libertarian, you have to be aware of some of the very weird nuances that go on in libertarianism for some of it to make sense. It's a terrible film. And Sorbo, because he's essentially been blacklisted from Hollywood, he had to do that damn film. I assume just for the work. He also got an executive producer credit on it. His wife was in it. So I hope he made some money off of it, but it's so low budget. I'll put a link to the film. After I'm done, I'll put a link to it because it's here on YouTube in its entirety. It's not listed, but you can find it with a Google search or a DuckDuckGo.search.com. And I'll warn you in advance, man. It'll be like 2 hours, 90 minutes, I've forgotten how long, that you will never get back. At best, I would suggest watching it with friends. It is one of those movies that's in places so bad it's good. And it'd be so confusing if you're not just a diehard, deep into it libertarian. Really bad movie. Really, the worst movie I've seen in a long, long time. I don't even know a movie that falls in a close second behind it. It's right up there with Plan 9 from Outer Space, and for the same reasons. You had people who were making this film who had the best of intentions, who really wanted to make some good art that showcased libertarian philosophies, but it's so all over the place and so poorly made and so low budget, and obviously so in places that you're just like, God, this is stupid. Sorry, Schulman. J. Neil Schulman is the filmmaker's name. Sorry, Neil, but that's the way your movie was. Marshall says, response, that's an idea that doesn't totally suck, thank Bill. Absolutely, man. Different religion, obviously, but, the guy is stuck, and it's quite a possibility that he could find something as another disaffected, Hollywood actor who got canceled on Ben Shapiro's network. That might be very interesting for him. Yes, Crypto1701. Doug Trumbull did the special effects in Brainstorm. The death scene reminded me of the end of 2001. Yeah. Except there they were clearly making a statement about heaven and hell, which was very interesting. Kirstie Alley, Crypto1701, could maybe join them. She's really speaking out. Yes, there's somebody who... she's still doing some work in Hollywood, but very infrequently. Might also be somebody who could be... could be tapped. I think if Shapiro's trying to build some kind of, media empire where he's being able to make his own good, well-made, well-budgeted content, then yes, there's a whole bunch of people that really ought to be contacting him or having their agents contact his, say, hey, what can we set up? I've been canceled out of Hollywood. I've been blacklisted. I can't work anywhere. Can I do something with you? Can we come up with something I can do for you? Hell, Gina Carano is going to be producing stuff. I'm sure she'll produce things that need actors, so. Starshi's Player says this blacklisting thing has gone too far. When you were growing up, McCarthyism was something we all heard about. Now it seems to be forgotten. It started to be forgotten with education in my era. And since then, it is barely taught, if at all. I don't think it's taught at all. I mean, they don't teach anything in K through 12 or much beyond it for that matter. Marshall says his Run, Hide, Fight movie was not bad at all. Thomas Jane was amazingly good in it. I have not seen that one. I'll probably have to go look it up. And, of course, the interesting thing for me is after watching Gina Carano in a number of different movies, the ones that are on Tubi, because that's what I can afford, but watching her now in some of those movies, it's weird because in many ways she strikes me as kind of a female Arnold Schwarzenegger, only with greater acting range. She's not a bad actress at all. She started out as an MMA fighter. She's done some action movies. Those are the ones that are mostly on Tubi. And she strikes me as kind of a female Arnold Schwarzenegger. Something that comes from a very background that, you wouldn't say, okay, well, they're going to be an MMA fighter and that's probably about it. But no, she goes on to become an actress. And, now she's going on to do some producing. I don't know that she'll be governor of anything, but she strikes me a lot as kind of a female Arnold Schwarzenegger in terms of how she's running her career and stuff. I think that's awesome. Gina, in love with you as well. Please come on my show. Not going to happen, of course, but you come on my show so that I can gush over you and fanboy over you and ask you out to dinner and ask you questions like if you're happy in your current relationship. Crypto1701 says Hollywood loves to blacklist their own. Absolutely, yes. We're seeing it with anybody who steps outside the woke lines. Crypto1701, history is being erased so fast. I feel like I'm in the Langoliers. Yes, yeah. Well, that's the problem when you have successive. I don't know if you've been ever here for me to talk about it. Education has always been near and dear to my heart. I've been around and I have family members that have been teachers at various times. I taught for 4 years at a technical college that I call the place that shall not be named. And there's a great article by Robert A. Heinlein called The Happy Days Ahead, where he goes through and details the decline of education in the United States. He was writing that in 1980. And if you just sort of project forward, you see what happened. You started out with an educational level for a one-room schoolhouse teacher that had to be pretty high because they had to be able to teach all these different kids different levels. Then the next generation said, there's some things in this curriculum that we just don't think we need to teach anymore. Let's take it out. So that generation was actually less educated than the previous one. The next generation of teachers said, there's other things in this curriculum we really shouldn't need to be teaching. Let's take them out. So that generation was taught less. And then the next one took them out, and it took more out, and it was taught less. And the next one took them more out. And finally, you're at the point where we almost are now, where you have the illiterate attempting to teach the illiterate. You have really nothing more than communist and socialist indoctrination going on, K through 12. And you get to the college level, don't even get me started, because when I taught there, I was finding that people could neither read nor write nor perform the most basic math, and that is not hyperbolic, that is an accurate representation of what I saw. So, Marshall says, like Arnold, but the way cute. Yes, he doesn't have a gap. She doesn't have any gaps in her teeth. She's a beautiful woman, period. This is a little earlier from where she is now. She has put on just a little bit of weight, but it isn't fat. It's clearly muscle weight, and it isn't bad looking. She's, when you're an MMA fighter, you got to be in really peak physical condition, no body fat and all that. So she's gotten a little more weight, but what do you expect? And it's perfectly healthy for somebody with her frame. It's just fine. But yes, put on a bib. My gushing is outrageous. Yes, absolutely. Marsha says he asked Kevin if he knew Gina, and Kevin replied, no, Sam won't let me, Sam being his wife. Yes, if you want to go watch, when I get done with this, I'll put the link to it. If you want to go watch alongside that, you can see Sam, his wife, in that film as well. But you watch alongside Night and you realize just how badly he's been blacklisted. Sorbo's been blacklisted. Again, somebody else, if I was him, I'd be on the phone to my agent. Please contact Ben Shapiro, see if there's something we can set up, Anyway, awesome. Gina Carano uncanceled herself. One of the first people, the only one that I can come to in recent memory, who was doing something that was in a fairly contemporary and popular thing, who uncanceled herself by saying they can't cancel us if we don't let them. Awesome. Love you. Come on my show. Please marry me. Crypto1701 says, I had to teach my kids about Vietnam. They never mentioned it in school. They graduated high school in about 2010. Yeah, that's about the time that I was teaching. A little bit later than that, I was teaching at the college level. Yeah, it's only gotten worse. Again, a successive degradation in terms of how much students were taught over a period of more than a century now. So that we're now at a point where the teachers are themselves damn near illiterate. And teachers, if you're hearing me and you're watching me and you want to come on and talk to me about it, I'm happy to do it. But I know from personal experience, I had my parents, on my father's side, my parents and his father and his uncles, for a while went to a one-room schoolhouse. And that one-room schoolhouse is now on the property that is remaining in my family. We're not getting rid of that. Some of that property, I'm sorry to say, is going to be going away because my relatives need it for their retirement. We are keeping a 10-acre chunk that includes that schoolhouse. And inside that schoolhouse, and it has been heavily, heavily fortified against mice, are several hundred first edition textbooks and books of various sorts floating around off there. Don't tell anybody because I took it out and I'm not supposed to. Is a first edition The Beasts of Tarzan, more than 100 years old now. That's what they were using to teach kids to read. And if you look at those things, man, it's this thick, book this thick, and the typeface is tiny. You pull out some of the mathematics texts, same thing. Today's textbooks are big honking things with letters this big. Just 70 years ago, they were using textbooks that were thick and had little tiny typefaces. They were learning way more than our students today learn. Way, way, way more. And it's not that our students are stupid. They're not stupid at all. They are just under-challenged. They are not given the opportunity to learn. They're just given watered-down crap. And it's because they now no longer have teachers that really do this. I have an entire video series on this called America's Broken Schools, including a video where I talk about how to fix it. I'll link to that series in my description box if you want to watch it. Education has been something that I've been very near and dear to my heart. It always comes up on this show in many different contexts because they're not teaching anything anymore. Nothing. And I hear this exact same thing out of many different teachers and college instructors. They say, yes, we're seeing nothing but complete illiterates showing up now. It is a long, slow degradation. So I know how to fix it, or at least a way to fix it. I would suggest a lot of different ways be tried. But my video series does end with a potential way that I would try to fix it if it were me. Let's see. Starseas Player says, Gina is truly one of those strong women who SJWs say they want, but not really. Yes, I have a marketing meme floating around out there that I make all the time. Didn't put it up here. But it's got a shot from the end credits of Mulan where they are busy cuddling up to the exact province, which is putting religious minorities into actual, real-life, literal concentration camps. And that's a screenshot there. It says supports let's see, murder, something like that. Supports genocide. That's what it says. Supports genocide. Then a picture of Gina Carano, and underneath it says, terrified of a strong woman. She's an actual strong woman on many, many different levels. One of them being this, they can't cancel this if we don't let them. Wonderful quote. Wonderful quote. It doesn't seem that teachers' unions shouldn't be illegal. They're fighting taxpayers. Well, teachers' unions are only a tip of an iceberg. It is really a long, long, long degradation of America's education, and to the point where you have the blind leading the blind. Crypto 17.1, new textbooks look like USA Today. Oh man, at best, yeah. Also, they need individualized teaching because they're going at the pace of the slowest people. That is the problem. When my grandfather was going to school, right? People who go through the 5th grade were learning about what you would learn today getting a general bachelor's degree, like general studies or something like that. That's what they were learning through 5th grade. 5th grade, after 6th grade through 12th grade was considered prep for college. And they really killed you with stuff then. But that was because when you got to college, it was a whole other level. It was a totally other level. When my grandparents were growing up, if you went to college, you were one smart, educated cookie. It wasn't just something everybody could do. You know, it required a lot of brain spit just to get that bachelor's degree. And if you went farther than that, if you went up to the doctorate level, that's when you were doing brand new, original research in your field. You were breaking ground, scientifically or otherwise, that ground that no one had ever broken before. You know, my grandmother was really, really proud of the fact that I went to college. And I'm like, you are easily as intelligent as me. Oh, I couldn't do that. Yes, you could. With today's colleges, you could easily get a bachelor's degree. But one of the things that could happen is if they just pounded in a lot more stuff and got people through 5th grade, and then that would be that. Go on to a trade school, whatever. But the prep school would then exist that would really cram you full of knowledge and weed out people who really would never be able to make it in a real college. That's one of the ways to fix this. Go back to that kind of system. I think there's also a possibility, the one that I mentioned in my video, and I won't go into an excruciating detail because I do it there. I think you should abolish the schools and hire people who work in the industry, such as myself, people who can go from being on the front lines of IT to teaching people the IT. Have them come in for a couple of hours every day to teach IT. You know, teach various concepts, teach networking, teach this, teach that. Have people from accounting come in to teach mathematics and accounting and things like that. People who do this stuff on a daily basis but can actually teach it, because there's a lot of us. And people who do these things, I have to tell you, until you try it, you may not be aware of just how easy it is for you to teach. You know, when I first started teaching, I was like, oh God, how can I teach? I've just done all this stuff. I don't know if I'd be a good teacher or not. And then you discover, oh, hell, yes, I can. I can teach this. I can teach a lot of things. I'll go, like I say, I'll make sure that link to my my playlist, it's actually on my page. If you go to my my main channel page, scroll down, you will see the playlist Americans Broken Schools. But I'll make sure there's a link to it when I'm done here. Drop of Truth, you'll have to catch me on demand. The company has arrived. Okay, I do have some content for you later on, so yes, definitely catch me. You asked about the Linux operating system. I'm going to talk about that if we've got some time here. Let's see. Crypto 1701. SJW would have loved to get Gina. SJW, I'm not so. Oh, the social justice warriors would have loved it. Well, they tried. They tried, and they failed. And that's one of the things I really like about her. As far as I know, she's the only person that I can think of who actually succeeded in saying F you to the SJWs. I don't have to have. You can't cancel me if we don't let you. That was awesome. Marshall says the next generation of textbooks will be written by IKEA. I'm not sure that they aren't already. Crypto 1701 says our society caters to the lowest common denominator because we don't. The lowest common denominator complains that it's not fair. Why? Yes, as I say, there is nothing wrong with holding kids back a grade, and that never happens. It happened when I was a kid, but it doesn't happen anymore. They just pass your ass, whether you're really capable of doing the work or not. And that does a disservice to the child. It really does. The child isn't learning. And if you get to a point where a child simply can't make it through anymore, just simply can't do it, that isn't necessary. That's not a bad thing. You know, people, it's like me, and I always make the analogy to myself and Michael Jordan, right? One of the greatest basketball players, if not arguably the greatest basketball player to ever live. On my best days, if I got into my best possible physical condition and trained like mad, you know, and if I was 2 feet taller, there is no way that I would ever be able to beat Michael Jordan in a game of one-on-one. He was naturally gifted. He was naturally brilliant at what he did. And there's no shame in the fact that I will never reach his level and would never reach his level. And almost no one ever will reach his level. There's no shame in that. It just means that I can't be a basketball player, not professionally, not in play against him. I just have to find something that fits my aptitudes. And there's going to be things that fit people's aptitudes, even if they can't get past the 4th grade in a real school. There's no shame in that. You just have to make sure there's no shame in it. You're like, okay, you're not as academically inclined as other people. There's lots of things that you can do. Crypto 1701, if you're going to teach anything, teach IT. Well, it's interesting. How to describe it. My first couple of quarters teaching, I was very nervous about stuff. And then after that, I was like, okay, I can teach just about anything. At an introductory level, I can teach a lot of different programming languages. If you want to throw anything networking at me, I did that for decades. If you want to throw anything server at me, did that for decades. I can teach all of that. That's not a problem. And it does take a knack, kind of, for when a student gets stuck on something, for kind of figuring out how to communicate with them in such a way that you understand how they're stuck and then can lead them out of being stuck from their perspective. It does require some of that, but that's a trick you pick up as you go along. It isn't something you don't have to be taught that necessarily. You pick it up as you go along, and you're exposed to more people who are different personalities and stuff like that. But people who are working in industries can certainly teach a couple of hours a week. And I think that probably the businesses they work for would be happy to let them go for a couple of hours a week, because the workforce, we need an educated workforce. What we're getting right now is people that are basically trained to flip burgers. That's the job that they really, unless you're very, very bright, that's really what you're getting out of college. And so we need a trained workforce. We really do. And, if you're just getting people who can't read or write, you got a problem all across the board. Crypto 1701, to current textbooks are written by monkeys, yes. And you didn't go to college and did quite well in IT. Absolutely. It's not a requirement. It requires, what I found when I was teaching is, it required, the biggest thing was aptitude. If you have an aptitude for thinking in a logical manner, that's good. That's also something that if you've got some level of aptitude but have never been exposed to thinking in a logical manner, you can still be taught it. The other thing is a work ethic, because, as you probably know, working in IT is just horrifyingly hard. The hours are just awful. I always like to tell people I was on call 24/7, 365 for 25 years. So you know how tough that is. So a good work ethic is good. But if you don't have the aptitude and you still have an excellent work ethic, I saw students go through and still be able to excel and get hired in the workforce. But if you got the aptitude and the work ethic, you're probably gold. Whether you go to school or not. If you got the aptitude and the work ethic, these days you can learn almost anything from online sources. In IT, you don't have to be bound by textbooks. I always used to tell my students, Google is the other half of your brain, because it is. In IT, you will find yourself using Google very, very frequently to find out things. Star Cheese Player says, everyone hit their like button. Yes, absolutely. Like, sub, hit the notification bell, share me on social media, and to tell all of your friends, family, neighbors, pets, and livestock to do the same, because when I grow, that's how I grow. Supercrew63 says most can make a better living after trade schools versus college. Absolutely. Yes, there is a huge place for trade schools. No question about that. Crypto 1701 says you have to have the ambition or you'll get nowhere in life. Yes, that's what I mean by work ethic, is the ambition, wanting to do it, that you really want to. That is probably the most important thing of all. If you're, like I say, if you've got both, if you've got the aptitude for IT and the work ethic and the desire to do it, you're going to go far. You're going to get into six figures and, fairly easily. If you got the aptitude but not the work ethic, you're probably going to be in big trouble in IT, because you need to be prepared to work bad hours constantly and have your superiors not understand what you're doing and get no thanks for it. But if you got them both, you're just golden. If you got the work ethic and your aptitude isn't so high, you can still make it pretty well. The work ethic is really important. Anyway, that's my little rant going off on education. Probably haven't said anything there that I haven't said in other videos, but it's always worth bringing back for new viewers. I'm sure Crypto 1701, you haven't seen me rant about that stuff. In any case, Gina Carano, love you. Please come on my show just so I can fanboy over you. That would be awesome. Marshall says, number one attribute, the insatiable drive to learn. Yes, that's what I mean by work ethic too, in some extent, because you cannot do IT and expect to rest on your laurels. You can't. You have to constantly be learning new technologies because they'll be implemented wherever you work. You can't just sit back and say, oh, I know Lotus Notes. Because 5 years later, Lotus Notes may be gone or used by 5 people. You have to constantly be learning new technologies. No question about that. And number two, being able to say, I don't know. Yes. You can't snow your way through and say you know something that you don't. You have to say, I don't know. When I was, by this point, if I was still working, my honest thing would be if they said to me, do you know something about this? I would say, well, I've heard about that. I don't really know much about it, but I'm at a point in my career where give me a few days with Google and I will become pretty knowledgeable at it. Much longer than that. If I'm using it, I'll be an expert. That happens after a while. Crypto 1701 says, people I worked with would ask why nobody thanked us. I always told them we were supposed to be invisible. If they're not complaining, all is well. Yes. I worked most of my career on the server side of things, and you would get things like the biggest problem was that the suits didn't know why they were paying us the money they were paying us. I remember once we wanted to introduce the Active Directory network into our network, and we could not explain to the suits why that was going to be so beneficial to them because they didn't have the technical understanding. How does that differ from just logging in? Well, it differs in many different ways. You get this, you get this, you get this, but then they don't understand what that is. To a lot of suits, IT is kind of a black hole, and it's a little difficult to make them understand. And when something's down, and I've had that happen repeatedly, where you're losing millions of dollars every minute that it's down, they're sitting here hovering over you, wondering why they paid all this money to you when something is down. But you don't get the thanks very much. There's no question about that. Crypto 1701, there are no problems in life, only opportunities. Yes. Marshall says, number three attribute is a love affair with total failure. Most people will never understand that. Yes. Yeah, I agree. You have to be at least not care beyond a certain point. I mean, the number of projects that I've been involved in that actually worked out well or were seen through to what I thought was the appropriate technical conclusion are far outstripped by the ones that didn't go well. Best one I can give. Let me get off of this card so I can talk about it a little more. The best example I ever give of something like this. President of the company I'm working for got completely snowed by not having technical people in meetings with him when he was talking with people about some a solution that he needed. And so he bought something that didn't really do what they said it was going to do. So they threw it at me. And so I sat for like a week and a half, 2 weeks, something like that, with packet sniffers, trying to figure out what was the communication between these various systems that they'd sold us, because they wanted firewalls put in place. And at the end of it all, I was able to make it work. And I went to them and I said, okay, I've been able to make this work. I have talked to the manufacturer. They have said they've never done this before. They won't support if it breaks. And the next time they come out with an update, we don't know that it'll work. And I said, my recommendation is don't do this. And fortunately, they did take my recommendation, because that sucker would have been under my supervision, and that would have been so miserable. Every time they had an update, I would be totally on my own. Anytime I needed help, I would be totally on my own. And fortunately, they took my advice. Didn't stop that particular president from making the exact same mistakes later, but hey. Marshall says, look at how most people view SN8 and SS9 crashes. Yes, SpaceX learned more from those failures than the 60 successes of Falcon 9. Yeah, absolutely. Good night, Crypto 1701. Great to have you in, and certainly feel free to come back and listen to my review of Batwoman. So, which I think that I'm going to go ahead and get into. We will get us a review, a very short one for reasons that will become apparent. A review of Batwoman Season 2, Episode 4, the name of which I don't even care about. SuperGroove63 says, I know I've said it before, but Gina would have made an awesome Wonder Woman. Absolutely. Gal Gadot is pretty, but that doesn't fit as a voluptuous Amazon woman. Oh, absolutely. She'd have made a great Wonder Woman. A great one. Yeah. I can't agree more. Okay, so this review of Batwoman Season 2, Episode 4. Well, as always, unlike most reviewers, I don't just sit down and rehash the plot, pausing to say what I liked or didn't like. Typically, not this time, you will find more depth than most reviewers because I'll touch on a lot of things that go into making a movie or a TV show. So, we will just take it as read that if you've come to this review looking for a review, you've already watched Batwoman Season 2, Episode 4, or you don't care if it's spoiled. However, for safety's sake, we should always issue a...
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. All hands, prepare for incoming spoilers.
Yes, it is a spoiler alert, and that is because I am a secret master of fandom, and that means that the fandom is strong with me. But this is neither a boast nor a brag. This is just where you find yourself after having watched, read, and listened to over 100 years worth of science fiction. The problem with secret masters of fandom is that we are cursed. You just can't see the new stuff for seeing the entire century that came before. You discover that very little is original, and it sometimes interferes with your ability to enjoy things. One thing I don't do is outrage reviews, because there's a lot of reviewers out there who are simply actors portraying outrage because outrage sells. They hate everything as a knee-jerk reflex because their viewers want to see them hate things. And this causes a weird feedback loop between fans and popular reviewers where ultimately nobody likes anything. But I don't do that. If I like something, I'll go into it in detail. If I dislike something, I'll say why in detail. But I don't do outrage. Unlike many other reviewers, I am the adult in this particular room. Let's see. Starships player Batwoman ratings dropping faster than Texas temperature. No question. I think the only people who are watching it now is reviewers. Marshall, we talked about kale or some of the vegetables. Seriously, Batwoman? Yeah. Well, I don't know why I'm doing it. The stage of the game, it's generally painful. SuperCruise63 says, I thought it was okay, but not great, but better than anything last year. At least it's watchable now. That would be my general. I don't have anything prepared on this, as I mentioned. I somehow this week lost a day, and I've watched this episode twice, but didn't really take much notes. It wasn't as bad as most of the episodes of last season. The performance of Alice continues to be much more low-key. I think that's good. She was way over the top the last season. There was some action that involved some stunt work that I thought was pretty good. The thing about Ruby Rose is she's so skinny that she did not look good going up against 200-pound stunt people. This one works for the most part. She works for the most part. I found it a little odd that they required putting into Ryan's backstory a parallel backstory to Alice. It wasn't quite the same. Alice was kept for years in captivity and all that, but now so was Ryan. Not years, but months in captivity. And I'm kind of like, why are you doing this? I assume that this is probably going to have some payoff later where she starts not wanting to kill Alice or something. I suspect that's what's going on, but it just seems to me a little bit forced. We'd heard about she was a foster child and living in poverty and all that. It just seemed a little bit forced. It was watchable. It was watchable. It wasn't anywhere near great. it was not something, if it was me just saying, oh, what am I going to watch tonight? Oh, I'm not going to watch Batwoman. That's, if it wasn't for me doing these reviews, I wouldn't watch it. One moment was just disturbing, and that was the sex toy moment. They're going through, God, I don't even remember this character's name, and I should by now. The Asian stepsister's apartment, because she's living in a crappy apartment above the gay bar that she now owns, because I guess Kate willed it to her or something. I don't know. But she's living in this room, and they're going through her stuff, and they find her sex toys. Did we really? Seriously? Did we need to go there? I thought that was weird. They've got Ryan now living in the same upstairs apartment from her. It's really odd because you look at this apartment, the thing that strikes me is it's in such a state of disrepair that, if it was me and I owned the bar down below, I would be painting it at least, putting up some drywall, and it just looks really bad and run down. I sort of get what they're going for, but still, if I was living in the thing and I owned the place, which apparently she does, put up some drywall, put up some paint, make it look decent. It looked very strange. Super Cruise 63 says Stargirl will be out in a couple of months. Very good show and not too wokish. Yes, I'm looking forward to Stargirl, very much so. Super Cruise 63 says, I think they were trying to pull the black card. People will not look for a white girl, but not a black one. Yes, that's where the woke hit, and that's where the part that really bothered me. They were saying that, with this backstory that they were giving Ryan, that she was held captive for a while. The idea was no one was looking for her because nobody cared about a black kid, etc., etc. And that just isn't how the world works. I know you guys want to be woke, but you have to be woke within the confines of reality in some way. That's just not the way the world works. Police get a missing person, they go looking for them. Maybe it takes them a while to find them, but they still go looking for them. Maybe they find them in a ditch, but they still go looking for them. And the color of their skin is irrelevant, So yeah, there was some woke stuff going on there, no question. But in general, the performances are fine. Nobody's brilliant. There's no Emmys going to be won out of this one. Dougray Scott's talents continue to be very underused. I just can't figure out why they're stuck on hinting that maybe Kate's alive. Because Ruby Rose is, she comes back, it'll be a complete shock. I don't think she's coming back. I don't think she left on good terms with those guys. Why do they keep teasing it as if she maybe will come back someday? Sent her down in a plane that exploded and blew up and all that. Okay, fine, she's dead. Just done. But no, they can't do that. They have to have this subplot about finding her. And maybe she's on a deserted island being held hostage or something like that. And it's just, why? Just why? Why are you doing this? Why? Doesn't make any damn sense. I don't know why they're doing it. Anyway, if I was going to rate the show, my rating system for Batwoman is always the same. 1 is existentially threateningly bad, which means you can die from watching it. 5 is passable. Aside from the woke, I guess I'd give it a 3. I wouldn't pay for it, that's for sure. It's a good thing it's on broadcast television. I would definitely not pay for it. So, okay. I tell you, I was going to do a chunk on Linux here, but that was largely because I had a request for it offline from Drop of Truth. I think maybe they'll, let's see, Super Cruise 3, maybe to be able to keep Alice as a valid character. Yes, because she was so tied up in it. That may be going on too. But considering that Alice had a hand in getting Ryan's stepmom killed, to me that's a good motivation to want to go and get Alice, for me. Starcheese Blair says maybe they will do to Kate Kane what they did to Sabrina. Lloyd's character in Sliders come back as a mannequin head in a jar. I don't know what they'll do. I don't know what they're thinking, other than maybe what Super Cruise 63 says. Anyway, like I said, I was thinking about doing some Linux explanation, but that was something that Drop of Truth had asked for. I think maybe I'll push that out to next week, so that maybe I'll do that earlier on in the show so he can be there before his company seems to arrive pretty much the same time every night. So that said, I got about a 2 hour-ish stream. That's not necessarily a bad place to cut it off, I found, because I seem to be getting more views after the fact if the streams aren't quite as long. And as I mentioned, for some weird reason today, I lost a day. I started working on this afternoon thinking today was Wednesday, looked at my schedule and, oh crap, I have to do this tonight. And I usually do the prep work the day or so before because my back will start to hurt. And today my back was hurting when I first sat down in the chair to do the show tonight. So in addition to kind of saying, okay, well, let's push this off until Drop of Truth can actually see it, I think, or live anyway, so he can ask me questions and things. I think what I'll probably do is just drop it off here. So yes, Starseeds Player, good night. I guess that is all that I have to say about that. I would love to keep the conversation going. So please leave your comments, questions, and nasty remarks, and I'll do my best to respond to you. So thanks for watching. That's all the time that we have today for this episode of Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.